Well, it turns out bees. Okay, thank you. Bees don't do all the pollinating business, and we'll find out more about that shortly. But I got interested in flower flies because there was a field guide came out, and because I'd been taking pictures of lots of insects around flowers, including these flies, and was learning about them between Bug Guide and iNaturalist. I was getting IDs, and when the field guide came out, I immediately grabbed that. But I was working on some projects on the Blue Ridge Parkway with Fred and Beth Umberger. We did a bee sampling one year, and the Parkway decided they wanted to have a study of the flower flies and find out what flower flies lived on the Parkway. So Beth dropped out, but Fred and I continued on. In 2021 and 2022, we did samples of flower flies at 6 locations on the Blue Ridge Parkway, and several times a year at each of the locations. So we learned a lot about flower flies, what we have around here. We added some knowledge to the Blue Ridge Parkway study of their biology, their biota, and we learned a lot because the head of our program there, who the Blue Ridge Parkway employee in charge of it, helped us do identifications, and we'd send in samples of the captured, the ones we netted at the locations. And of course, they don't want you netting on the Parkway in view of the folks traveling the Parkway. They want you to be out of view. So we were at locations away from the Parkway, the areas where tourists mostly are. But we did that for a couple of years, and we learned a lot. So we'll get on here to the actual information on flower flies. So opinions differ on beauty. I think flower flies are exceptionally beautiful. Most of them, flower flies, resemble bees or wasps. The smaller ones tend to resemble kind of a generic bee or wasp, you know, yellows and blacks, and maybe a little bit of other coloration. The larger ones can be much more specific to being actual mimics of specific species. So, and I think they're beautiful, but you'll have to judge for yourself. So what are flies? Does anybody here know what flies are already? They have much experience with it? Yeah, we have some people who work for entomology, Beth Umberger and Mary Rhodes, so they're real familiar. But the flies are in the Diptera, in the class Insecta, and the Diptera means they have 2 wings, and this differentiates them from other insects, which have 4 wings. Well, we're trying backwards. It's not going backwards, Bob. One more. Oh, okay. Yeah, there we are. We got it. We got it. Okay. So in place of the second pair of wings, they have these small clubs that are on the rear part of the abdomen, and they provide orientation of the fly when it's flying. It's estimated the flies give about 1/3 of the insect pollination services, and flower flies are the most important among them. So the Syrphidae, the flower flies, are a family in the order, and there are 4 subfamilies in that family, and we'll go through those in the program. Another common name for the group is hoverflies, and I frequently just refer to them all as syrphids. So there's 3 different terms that I may be interchangeably using. I'm just warning you now.
Hold on. I got it.
Okay. Okay, there we go again. All right, so we'll start with the Microdontinae. There's a total of 25 species. So this is a really small group in the United States, in North America. But the larval foods that are known for these are ant eggs or larvae. I want you to think about that. Have any of you ever disturbed an ant colony? They're pretty protective. You're not going to get hold of their larvae or their eggs without a big fight. So how the heck do they get in there and eat eggs and larvae? You know, you got a fly larva trying to eat the ant eggs and larvae. And it turns out that the larvae that have been studied can release pheromones that mimic the ants that they're using as their host. So that means that they actually have to be pretty specific about which ants you're visiting as a larva, or you're going to be part of the food chain going the other way. So here's one that I got a photo of on the parkway. This is, you notice the antennae look like bee antennae much more than like fly antennae. However, they have the same characteristics of fly antennae in that they have three main parts of the antennae with a little hair-like structure that comes up off of it, off of the last portion of it. And that hair-like structure is called an arista, and it's on pretty much every fly antennae. And you see the little structures at the rear of the abdomen that replace the wings, those halters that replace the second set of wings and help provide orientation of the fly as it's flying around. So this one's not very big, less than a ½ inch. And unfortunately, I don't have all my notes on how big they are. So you're going to get a relative idea only. But we've got most of these flies are going to be anywhere from 0.2 of an inch to less than an inch in length. So they're not real big. So this is another, the one that I wasn't able to identify other than it's in this genus, or sorry, in this subfamily, in the Microdontidae, and another. And these were, I got down in the Mount Rogers area, so they seem to be fairly common in the wet meadow and meadow areas there. This one I found in Craig County, my study area, which is around a constructed wetland area that was put in there in the forest. This one we were able to identify the species. It's a larger one. It's close to 3/4 of an inch at maximum. And the black-bodied ant fly looks quite much like a bumblebee, but you can see those same characteristics. You can easily see the halter there in the side, and you can see those antennae are similar with their elongated antennae. Okay, that's it. I got 4. I've seen 4 of those. So you've gotten to see everything that I've seen of them. The next group, the Aristolini, the larvae live in sap trails under bark, rot holes in tree. They live in aquatic environments of all kinds, or decaying organic debris. So something wet, and they purify water by filtering microorganisms out of it. So they're very important in purifying water. So here's one, the narrow-headed marsh fly. This one's kind of interesting in that there are several in this group that look almost identical in this genus, but we can look at the fly antennae, which are much more of the typical fly antennae here. And it's got the little arista, the little hair-like structure coming off of the larger part there at the end. But in this one can be differentiated because those antennae are reddish in color, and the rest of them in this genus have black antennae. So I was able to easily identify this one. Here's another one. This was in my neighborhood, actually. And remember, all of these, the larvae are in this whole subfamily. All of them are aquatic media. They're filtering as larvae. As adults, of course, they visit flowers, and so that's where you're going to see them. This one was up by the Pandapus pollinator garden. wasn't visiting flowers at the time, I was visiting the gravel, but this one's normally about a 1/2 inch to 3/4 of an inch long, and it's common copperback. The golden back here, as you can see, is a lot more, what we consider B, looks like a typical bee. But you can see it's got those little fly antennae. The Narcissus bulb fly can actually be quite a pest of, this is not a non-native species, it was introduced, and it could be somewhat of a pest on Liliaceae flower bulbs. It's not a very severe pest though. This fly I encountered at my study area was sitting on a daffodil petal. Eastern cat can fly. This one we just ran into in September. We were visiting at Chincoteague, and these will breed, the larvae are found in brackish or in different water environments, including brackish environments, but they are actually important in helping clear up even sewage treatment ponds. I love the eye patterning on this species. It's really impressive. Mulatto posticata is a larger one. This can be up to 3/4 of an inch in length. And I was observing this across a clearing in the woods up at the study area, and thought it was a robber fly because it looks very much like the bumblebee mimic robber flies, the Laphria group. But I noticed it didn't have the mouth parts of a robber fly, which is, a big, sharp, pointed mouth part. And this didn't have that. So I figured out eventually that it was actually a flower fly. But it looks very much like a bumblebee. The eastern swiftwing is kind of interesting. They have the elongated face. It looks incredibly like a bumblebee, but if you look at the antennae, again, they're fly-like antennae. But these have very interesting characteristics in that the arista, the hair-like structure, is feathery. So they call it plumose. And it tells you right away that it's this genus. And they have another interesting characteristic. They already look a lot like bumblebees, but this one noticed that I was studying it and taking pictures, and it leaned back, lifted its forelegs, and had them pose as bee antennae, so that I would be totally convinced that it was a bee, because now it's got long antennae like a bee. The Aristolus genus, there's a lot of species in this, and some of them are incredibly common. So if you're hanging around native wildflowers, or just about any flowers, you'll be seeing different species. So this is the transverse banded dronefly, very common species. This is the common dronefly. And this actually is a honeybee mimic, which should give you a clue that it's not actually from around here. It's actually an introduced species from Europe. And but it's very common also. So you can run across it in your wildflowers gardens. The black-shouldered dronefly is another very common species. All these run about a 1/2 inch in length average. And this is the European dronefly, again, one that's not is introduced. It's supposed to be very common. I don't see it as often, but I'm sure in many areas of the country it's more common in the Northeast.
Were these introduced on purpose, or were they brought over in plant material?
Yeah, they're all introduced in plant material or brought over in water or something, the larvae being, filter feeders. The guidebook authors think that this tropical plushback is actually an undescribed variant, but morphologically you can't tell them apart. So it's called the tropical plushback still until somebody can figure out how to differentiate them. And this is another of the plushbacks. I haven't seen any of these around here. This was actually at Eastern Shore one fall, and they were, I actually got 3 species of plushbacks, not including the tropical, on that trip out to Eastern Shore. Okay, this is one that everybody seems to be able to find. They're plentiful out at Pandapus, so I hope you can all run into them. This is the Malacia virginiensis. This is the Virginia giant. It's up to close to 1 inch in length. So it's probably our biggest of the flower flies. And it's a mimic of the southern yellow jacket queen. It's quite striking, and they'll buzz loudly and they'll fly around your head and make you think you're under attack by some giant hornet or something, or wasp. And then you realize that it's this species and you're fine. It's just buzzing loudly and not bothering you. And so it's gotten a local name. In our part of the country, it's known as the news bee or the good news bee, because it's not going to do anything bad to you. This is not a flower fly. This is a bald-faced hornet. And I want you to notice a few things about it. One, you can see around the head, the eyes are there in the front, and then there's black of the eyes and then the white of the head structure. It's got the long antennae, but you look at the white patterning on it. But when we look here at the bald-faced hornet fly, this is a very, very specific mimic. It looks just like it. Its eyes have the black and white patterning in it to mimic the head of the hornet. But that's actually the eye you're looking at. But its white markings are very much like that of the bald-faced hornet. The antennae, of course, are a giveaway instantly. This is the eastern hornet fly. These are pretty common. People are seeing them all over. Chris tells me she gets them in her yard all the time. They have the eye patterning that I think is really beautiful. And again, it looks very convincing as a yellow jacket or other wasp species here. This yellow spotted falsehorn I found up at my study area. And I want you to notice something about its posture here. Its forelegs are again held aloft like we saw with the swiftwing. And the upper part of the legs is yellow. And where it's trying to mimic the antennae there is where it turns black. The lower part of the leg and the foot are all black, and it looks like large antenna waving. The Simon Ledecker with a spotted wood fly, I've found at a few locations, including my study area. It's rather striking, and it's got this odd, large base for the antennae, but it still has fly-like antennae. I've only seen this once, and I thought it was a kind of wasp, and it was acting just like a wasp. It was heading down underneath the leaves, hunting. It looked like it was hunting like a wasp for insect prey underneath the leaves. I have no idea what it was doing underneath the leaves, but it was wandering around, but it was really striking and very wasp-like. And then I saw the antennae and was even more amazed. These guys are a little smaller. This is the long-haired leafwalker. this genus, they're typically found on side of trees or sitting on leaves or branches, and about a half-inch in length. And I'm just kind of looking with the abdomen on this one with the reddish. The yellow-thighed thickleg, this was found in one of our study areas on the Blue Ridge Parkway when we were doing that study. It was a first record for the Blue Ridge Parkway. And I don't know. I just thought it was very cool looking, and Fred and I were quite excited to have found it. Ceratipipian's a common compost fly. Again, you know, its larvae are growing up there and purifying, decaying vegetable matter. So providing, you know, not just the pollination services, but also purifying. The American stout fly is interesting. It's got that produced face, as we would say. It's got a large protrusion out of the front of its face. The mouth parts look like they lever out. It's really amazing how far out the mouth parts extend on this species. And I find them in the jewelweed. Normally when I find them, it's around jewelweed. I found them in other locations, but most of the time when I've seen them, it's around jewelweed. So it's kind of, and it's the easiest one to identify, I think, of all the, because of that face, it's the easiest to recognize. This I don't have identified other than to genus. And the pufftails are not all that big, and they like to live up in damp woods. This was the one I've seen. This one was at, and I got the one picture. This was at Falls Ridge, right next to the stream at the edge of the parking lot. So it was just on the edge of the damp woods there. And it's less than a half-inch long. Okay, this is my favorite because, you know, everybody wants to be able to say wavy mucksucker. I'm sure you can all think of some applications. But also because everything about it is pretty spectacular. The antennae are longer, like not really typical fly-shaped antennae. The body itself looks bejeweled, with all the iridescent on it. The eye patterning is the most spectacular, I think, of all the species. And it's about a 1/4 inch in length. It's not easy to find just because it's so tiny. But I found them in my neighborhood. This one was on the Blue Ridge Parkway. They're around, so keep your eyes open for the wavy mucksuckers. This is the only shot I have of this genus. We have no idea which species because, I got one shot. This was on the Blue Ridge Parkway study, and I didn't capture it because I was going back to the car to get my lunch when I took this photo and didn't have my net with me, to the great irritation of our project leader. But, at least we got a photo. Okay, the third subfamily, there's 29 identified species in 4 genera, so there's not a whole lot of them. And the known larval foods are mostly gall-making or leaf-curling aphids, adelgids or psyllids. So they do a big service to us in 2 ways. One is the pollination again, but also because they're getting rid of plant pests. So this is the one I've ever seen. Again, this was on the Blue Ridge Parkway during our study. And again, I didn't capture it with the net because I was, on the way back to the car again, and the net wasn't in my hand. And you can kind of see this shiny surface there of the leaf that it's on, the grass blade that it's on. And that is because we were using an attractant to try and get more of the flies to come in. We were spraying artificial honeydew, which is a mixture of honey and Coca-Cola and water. It seems to work okay at bringing things in. Finally, the Surfini, the larvae are primarily aphid predators. Some are generalists and others will specialize in just a few species of aphids. The adults, like the native plants with, well, you can see which types they really go for. So here's an individual of this subfamily, finding a good home for the kids. As you can see, it's got plenty of food when they come out. So Susie Leslie sent me this series of photos here back in 2023, last year, of a larva from one genus in this subfamily. And they're feeding on aphids. It's a little hard to see, actually, that in a couple of the shots, you've got a larva with its mouth full of aphid. But you can certainly see the yellow aphids there and the larva among them. So this is one of the little tiny ones. This genus, Paragus, the grass skimmers. This one is not too hard to identify. It looks quite different from the rest of the genus, but I mean, these guys are tiny. These are, again, in the, a 1/4 inch size. They're little bitty guys. So the rest of the genus looks like this. And the difference is they have the hairy eyes. They have bands of hairs on the eyes. They have on the back of so that there's behind the head, we have the thorax, right? So the top of the thorax, the first part is the scutum and then the scutellum. And on the back of that, on this individual, you can see that it's yellow. And that'll tell you that it's not the previous species. That and the bands of hair on the eyes, that identifies it as in the nominate, the genus nominate species. So we don't know which one of those. Probably have to dissect them to be able to tell. But it's in that genus. All right, we're gonna do 2 or 3 things here. These are very common, the variable dusky face. This is a female. How do we know it's a female? Let's look at a few of the characteristics that's letting us know. The males and females actually have different abdominal patterns on these. If you can see the markings on the different sections of the abdomen there, you can see this kind of triangular pattern to those yellow markings. But you can also see when you look at the head, the eyes are separated quite a bit. Now, this is not universally true. The amount of separation varies in different species and groups. But in general, the females have the eyes that are not close to each other. There's a good separation between them. Also, you can see that her abdomen is totally swollen with eggs at this point. So from these 3 things, we know darn well that this is a female. When we look at the male, we can see that it's got the abdominal patterns. It's got little rectangles rather than the triangular yellow markings on it. And look at the eyes, how the eyes actually abut. They actually touch here. And so this is the male of that species. So this looks like a male of the sedge sitters, eastern forest sedge sitter. These are kind of hard to tell apart, I might add. This one's the easier one to tell apart than the rest. Okay, so I have to apologize for this picture. We were at the Eastern Shore. The wind was blowing about 25 miles an hour. I was blowing at 25 miles an hour in the wind, and the bush was blowing and the fly was flying and blowing. So that combination makes for a pretty bad shot. Luckily, this one's really identifiable because of the patterning on the abdomen. Also, the abdominal shape is very different than what we've been looking at. It's got that elongated, thin abdomen that then swells towards the tip. But that coloring on it with the yellow spots and the yellow ring at the behind the thorax there, that tells you it's got to be that. The Eastern bandwing hoverfly has those markings in the wings, and it's got a long, elongated widening towards the tip of the abdomen. This was actually in my neighborhood, in my next door neighbor's yard. We found a lot of these on the Blue Ridge Parkway, the cobalt hoverflies. I've seen them out at Pandapis as well, so they're around. They have that patterning in the wing, which is unique. They have the coloration and the shape of the abdomen, which is a bit different. So they're pretty easy to tell apart. Pretty cool looking, I think. The Toxomeros geminatus, so this one and the next one are probably our most common species. If you have flowers, you've got these guys around. You just have to look for them because they're really small. But we like them. They don't generally look for you. They're looking for the flowers, but we do have a couple of shots of one on the park manager's daughter's face when we were out at, we don't know why they liked her, when we were out at Crater Lake State Park. And this is the margin calligrapher. And I think this one's probably the most common species in North America. These two species on our Parkway project, after the first year, they said, please don't send us anymore. We got enough to know that they're absolutely everywhere. So this is a little bit larger than those guys, but still not very big, a little over a ½ inch. So this is a male of the tufted globetails. And why would you call it that? That's interesting to call it that. Well, let's look at a mating pair. And the male is above, and you can see that lobus genitalia at the tip of his abdomen as they're mating there. And you notice the pattern on the abdomen is very different between the male and female. Of course, we could note that the eyes were touching too on the male in the previous shot. This isn't the greatest picture, but it's the pictures that I got. We were taking a butterfly walk out at the Leatris patch out there on Craig Creek. And the Roanoke native plant people were up for that walk. And as we went down to the creek and started coming back, I had this something I couldn't tell what it was exactly. And I was trying to get pictures of it, and they were wondering what the hell I was doing because I wasn't paying attention to them. I was trying to take pictures of this. It's my only experience of the American harlequin. It's got the interesting little brown stripes between the black and yellow, on the black between the yellow stripes on the abdomen, making it pretty easy to identify. Pretty cool little guy. This is a rare species around here. I actually ran into this down at Mount Rogers area, and that's the habitat they like, is with having that kind of well, those high elevation plants that's what they're going to be living. This genus, I'm going to have a few of these because these are also pretty common. This one, not particularly. I haven't seen that many of them, but this is actually my neighborhood. large-tailed aphid eater. This is one of my most commonly encountered species. Just about everywhere I go, I run into these. And it's one or the other of those two species, either the long-tailed or short-tailed aphid eater. To tell them apart, you dissect a male. If you got a female, you can't tell them apart. If you dissect the male, you can tell them apart. That's it. I put this in, I have other shots of them, but I just like that this was up on White Top Mountain in one of the big meadow at the bald area at the top. And there were a large number of these smooth tails were on the thistle there. This is a fairly common species. I get more of them up on the parkway, but maybe that's just because I'm looking more there. And finally, the broad-banded meadow fly. These aren't supposed to be that rare, but this is the one of this genus I've ever seen. It was at my study area. And luckily, he hung around and posed for me a lot so I could get a decent picture of him. Notice the antenna on this one are again quite different from the typical fly antennae. So it's a good bee mimic. So, how do I know anything about this? Well, as I explained, there's a field guide out now. And I brought one with me for folks here can take a look at it. And I get my pictures and put them on iNaturalist, and there are identifiers there that are incredibly helpful in getting you to the right species. Posting on Bug Guide, and particularly identifier Bill Dean. He was apparently the UK, the leading British identifier of flower flies, and then moved to Canada, and then became the North American leading identifier of flower flies. So he's a pretty impressive guy. And the Blue Ridge Parkway Surfeit Project, and our leader, Paul Super, is the science coordinator at the Appalachian Highlands Science Learning Center at the Smoky Mountains National Park. So that's pretty much it on our program. Do we have any questions?
There's some of those pictures you had that were on rocks. So what was attracting them to the gravel or the rocks you were in?
Okay, so the question is, what was attracting the flies to gravel or rocks? I can only conjecture there. I don't know for sure. I do know with butterflies that lots of times it's because their mouth parts are adapted for licking up liquids, and that when they're looking for certain nutrients that are, salts or other things that might be available in liquids on the ground, and they can, lap things up. Flies have a more adapted mouth for licking things up, unlike the tube of a butterfly mouth. So they might be getting nutrients there, or they might just be resting. So I'm just it's just conjecture. I don't know the exact reason they were there. Mary?
Yeah, are they visiting the flowers for nectar or pollen or what? And are they really pollinating?
Well, as you saw, the flies provide an estimated 1/3 of all pollination services. All of flies, not just flower flies. So
going to the flower, like I don't know.
They are, yes, they're eating, they are feeding there. That's their attraction to it. I should have pointed out when we were looking at that the common name tropical plushback, did you notice it had stripes on its back there? So according to what they're saying in the guide, the stripes are actually to funnel the pollen into certain areas there, which I thought was kind of fascinating, but I haven't read enough to know more about how that all works.
And a number of your photos, plots did have pollen on them.
Yes, right. Chris is pointing out that a lot of the photos, you could see the pollen on the flies. Well, flowers are clever that way.
So do they all have the same kind of mouth parts? Like a housefly has the spongy and such things, but you can also have biting flies.
Yeah,
it's
so
always-
okay, so Mary's asking if the different kinds of mouth parts on these flies, that some fly species will have biting mouth parts. We've all met a mosquito before, gnats and horse flies and other things, robber flies with a big injecting mouth part. So yes, there are a number of flies that have biting and sucking, biting mouth parts, but this group has, none of them have that. They all have, like a sucking mouth part. Yeah. Any other
Do they
questions?
smell your false nectar, or how do they find the nectar that you put out?
Okay, so being asked whether they smelled the nectar. I don't know the mechanism, whether it's scent or whether it's, just visually looking for, I suspect more if it's visual, but I don't know for certain that they're looking for, honeydew, which is being produced by aphids or whatever. So they could be just out looking and, we're giving artificial, but they could be looking for the real thing. So, you're just trying to replicate what they would already be looking for.
Okay, you're doing a survey. Like excuse me, are you repeating the location every year? And are there other researchers doing different sections of the park?
Okay, Mary asked a question about the study that we did for the Parkway. It was a 2-year study, so it's completed. And there were, in Virginia, master naturalist volunteers operating at many locations along the Parkway. And in North Carolina, there were some volunteers, but a lot of the people down there were students at Appalachian State University. So there was a variety of researchers, field researchers, doing these studies at the different places.
So the what? Well, the life cycles, are they more in the spring and then they're all year, or do they have short, like some other insects just have certain months that they're really there?
So the question was, what's the lifespan, I guess, and how many generations are there in a year?
Like skippers, like there's some in the spring, some in the fall, whatever.
Okay, what's the flight periods? Yes, there are definitely different flight periods. Some of them are going to be much more visible in the spring, some of them in the fall, some of them through the whole, like I was talking about, some of those ones in the Surfini, you can get them all year round. But yes, there are certain that have distinctive flight periods, and you'll only find them then. But a lot of them are, the common ones are just, have a pretty much year-round flight path. I don't mean they're not going to be flying, of course, except when it's warm enough for them to be out and live. They overwinter generally as larvae or eggs.
If they're so small, I wanna know what candle attributes.
Okay, so the question was, how do you get pictures of something that small? So I actually have, okay, I actually have 2 different ways I've been getting photos. One is I use a macro lens that I had bought years ago to use for other insects, but I'm just following through with these insects. So the macro lens, 180 millimeter macro, to give you a little bit of elbow length, so you're not frightening off the insect before you can get a picture. But in general, I use the same lens for everything: birds, bugs, whatever. And it's a 100 to 400 millimeter zoom lens with an SLR, digital SLR camera. And that's what up until now I've been using. That's starting to get a little precarious because they're not supporting it's all going to mirrorless now, so it may have to change up my whole game if I can figure out what lenses are going to be available, et cetera. But at this point, I'm still using a DSLR with this 100-400 lens. So there's a lot of cropping going on in those photos, as you can imagine. Any other questions? Do we have any remote questions? Has somebody monitoring? Do we have any questions online? Sorry, Bob's going to fix it here so we can look at that.
Yeah, well, we'd see them over here. Let's see.
I think you answered the questions already that were in the chat.
Sharing. There we go. Did we answer?
Chat.
Yeah. Someone said we probably answered all the questions in the chat.
Okay, so Lauren's question was the same. Do I use a special camera or phone to take pictures? I don't think I've ever successfully used the cell phone for pictures because, they're kind of small. And if you try to get close enough to use the phone, they tend to be leaving. But yeah, are there any other questions about anything there? Oh, a recording will be posted. Okay, very good. Well, thank you all for attending.
Hey, Bob. Hey, Bob. Could you remind everyone if they remember to vote for the officer and the budget?
Right, that's what I've got on my notes here.
Great.
Now, there's one question down here. What was the species who stripes channel pollen again?
That tropical alpaka
The tropical palpata?
or plushback. Tropical plushback is the common name.
Yeah, the common name Bill says is the tropical plushback. All right, I was pretty impressed with all the photographs. When a pretty good photograph gets an apology, that's pretty impressive. I tell you, I saw a show years ago, folks, where somebody looked at the audience and every picture he said, "I'm really sorry, this is a bad picture." And he was being very truthful. But it was still a good presentation they did. But these pictures were just amazing. So the only other for business issues this evening is we have two items. One is election of officers. We have, and if anybody is interested in the vice president position, they can write in. I know I did a write-in. So yes, so the election and also the budget. So we have a proposed budget for the year. The board took last year's budget, took a look at the items and said, that's a pretty reasonable guess as to what we're going to do. So it's pretty much the previous year's budget. I think there are some minor adjustments in there. But those are the two items that we need to approve, because I know I get a little comment from the state and they go, all the other chapters voted. Well, there was a reason. I talked to them about why we're going to do the vote now. So they're happy with that. So if people would, you should have gotten an email to everybody, and it's very simple. Takes far less than an hour to complete this questionnaire. So just a few minutes, few questions. Please take the time to vote. We need to have a quorum to elect the officers and to pass the budget, which I think everybody should find reasonable. So, and there are no other issues. I guess we would call the meeting this evening. Does anybody have anything to bring up?
Except, Beth says everything's set for December meeting, I guess.
Which will be at the, Garden Museum.
Great. So from Beth Umberger, we have that we're all set for the meeting next month. Remember that the meeting in December is the members' meeting. It's like a potluck, so we are at the museum in Christiansburg here. We'll send out a reminder about that. It won't be here. And then in next year, of course, we'll be in Blacksburg. So just have this transition hopping from here to the museum in Christiansburg over to Blacksburg. So it'll be a potluck type of nice December fun meeting.
It's actually like refreshments.
Refreshments is what, yeah, finger food. So, yeah, so not like a regular dinner. So I made cookies last year. That was fun to do. So, any other items?
And you might remind people because we do pictures of things that people have.
Yeah, right. That is how members night works, is that people bring in pictures of places they visited, gardens, or like last year, I showed pictures of 2 prairies that I visited on my trip out to Wisconsin. And so it's a chance to show pictures. And a really fun one is I brought in a picture of a plant that was immediately at the meeting. A real pretty one I saw called a wahoo. That is apparently a member of a native bittersweet plant. So that's pretty good. All right. I see no other issues, so I guess we'll adjourn the meeting. Thank you for attending.
We have one of our. Interesting.
We have to try to get some credit.